Join us as we share our experiences, strength, and hope. When the world says, give up, hope whispers, try it one more time.
Good morning, Mile High, and welcome back to sharing our stories here on Jammin' 101.5 and Flow 107.1. If you're just tuning in, this program is all about addiction and recovery. My name is Slim. My co-host, Tomas Hernandez with Tribe Recovery Homes. And each week we bring in a different guest to come in and talk about their journey from addiction to recovery. We believe that with this program, sharing our stories, that we can help other people in the Mile High find their pathway to recovery. There are lots of different pathways to recovery. There's no one right way to do it. And we believe that if we can share as many different stories as possible, hopefully we can help folks here find that pathway, or at least start to believe that they can do it. And if it's not them in particular, maybe it's you have a friend, a family member, a loved one who you know is struggling in addiction, and you can just be that shoulder that they can lean on, and also learn to understand them a little bit more and maybe help them to begin their pathway to recovery. So thanks for joining us. Tomas with Tribe Recovery Homes is here. He is the sponsor of this program. And I want to tell you, Tomas, I am so, a round of applause, because you've moved into Las Vegas also to Recovery Homes. Tell everybody a little bit about that, man.
Good morning, by the way, everybody. I hope everybody's well, and I kind of have a thing. If your hangover hurts, I'm very glad to hear that. So stop drinking. Anyway, with that being said, yes, Tribe Sin City Inc. is born in North Las Vegas. It's going to be a great extension of what we do here in Denver. I'm very excited about it. Getting most of the news. I just got my 10-year coin for being 10 years clean.
Congratulations.
On Sunday, so it is possible, double digits. Great to be there. Looking forward to this journey. Tribe's getting bigger, and the need is not getting smaller. So we figured we need to make this Tribe family a whole lot larger. We're going to mix Denver with Las Vegas, and you're going to see some diversity here on the show. We're going to be able to make that into a national brand. Expand, make and have fun with this, because I think Max Media is the truth. It's the best with Jammin' and Flow and the family that's here in the Max Media family. I'm just really excited to have that involved. I couldn't be Slim. I couldn't be even more. I'm never speechless, but some parts I don't know what to say because I am. If that makes sense.
Well, I'm just proud of you, because I know that there was a time in your life when you were ready to not even do this anymore, and you're so revitalized, and now you're growing, and you've helped hundreds and hundreds of people, and to see that you're going to expand that and continue to do that, man, I'm just really proud of you, and I'm proud to know you and call you a brother, a friend, and a co-host, and just to have us doing this. This morning we have Nohnie Al-Jalil. Did I say that right? Did I?
You did.
Did I nail it?
You nailed it.
Yeah,
Yes.
She's from Colorado Springs, and Nohnie is our guest for sharing our stories. And Nohnie, we gave you a little rundown of what this program is beforehand, but I just want to tell you thank you so much for being here and coming in to share. And we're going to turn this over to you, and this time becomes yours, and it's sharing your story. So, Nohnie, it's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you. And Mile High, our guest this morning to share her story of recovery, addiction and recovery, is Nohnie Al-Jalil from Colorado Springs, and we turn it over to you. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks. I just want to start off by saying what an honor and privilege it is to be here this morning with all of you. And Tomas, thank you. Slim, thank you so much. To be an addict in recovery is something that I never even dreamed was ever possible. For so many years of my life, I was in my active addiction for 24 years solid. And recovery was something for me that I never believed was ever even something I could ever even do. I'm going to kind of start my story off pretty much where it ended. In May of 2018, I woke up handcuffed and shackled to a hospital bed. I didn't know how I got there. And when I woke up, there was a sheriff sitting next to me. I knew that it was over. There was something in me that had changed when I opened my eyes and I looked at that sheriff. There was a long space of time in between what I remember and when I woke up. When I opened my eyes, everything was different. Absolutely everything was different, and something had shifted. From that 24 years leading up to that moment, and there had been times in my life where, bits of times, like chunks of time would come and go, and it didn't really matter to me. But in that period of time, something definitely changed for me. And I knew some way, somehow, that I was going to get out of this life that I had been living. And it wasn't on that day, but it was about 2 months later, July 5th of 2018, that I ended up turning myself into custody, and that became my clean date, July 5th of 2018. But it was not before cutting off my ankle monitor and going to Las Vegas. And so that's kind of a link in for part of what my story became, is that, I get to be a part of an amazing recovery story where now, almost 5 years later, I'm a part of this amazing team where I am transitioning back into a life of reintegration and recovery. And I'm in business development and outreach coordination, and I'm going back to where it all began, almost 5 years later to the date. And I get to spread the message of recovery, strength, hope, experience, and be a part of something that's just so much bigger than myself. And I am eternally grateful and proud and honored and humbled by the experiences that I have today. So like I said, it's chopped and screwed. Like most addicts, I am not linear, and I'm going to reverse it all the way back to May 28th of 1981, which was when I was born to two of the most beautiful people I know. My father, who is from the state of Kuwait. My name is Hanan Mohammed Ahmed Al-Jalil Al-Jalil. And my mother, Diane, who is, she is originally from Long Island, but she is Scottish and Irish. And so that combination for me is a really interesting combination, right? Being Kuwaiti and being Scottish and Irish, it really shaped my identity in a lot of very, very interesting ways, because what that meant is that I had this cultural identity that didn't really jam up, right? So like I had these two very conflicting cultures between my mom and my dad, and they were, they loved each other. They met in college and they loved each other. But when you have two conflicting cultures like that, for a little Hanani, it became a struggle, and I can touch on that a lot more a little bit later. But so I was born in Colorado Springs, Colorado in 1981, which makes me the Oregon Trail generation. Whoop whoop. We were a different breed. So being from that generation, right? I grew up in the 80s, and I had an older brother. Who me and my older brother were really close. A lot of I was from Colorado Springs, born there. And then my parents moved us to Southern California, and that's where I stayed until I was about 7 years old. My memories of my childhood were really awesome, right? My dad and my mom, I really have a lot of very cool memories of my dad being around. And it was mostly my dad. My dad used to make like blueberry pancakes, and me and my brother played together all the time. And my mom was in school, and my dad was too. My dad came here to finish his PhD, and he's a professor of finance and economics, and he did that. And my mom was pursuing higher education as well, and went into like the medical field, and was doing, I think it was like orthopedics or some weirdness. I don't know. I have a lot of very good childhood memories. And then a decision was made at one point. We were always supposed to go back to Kuwait. That was the plan. And I even remember being a small child, and I learned Arabic, and And then my dad taught us we learned all the customs. And I mean, I was very, my culture and my identity and being Kuwaitia, like this was stuff that I knew. And like I said, the plan was to move back to Kuwait. My mom had made the decision that she wanted to pursue her medical career further. And at that time, a decision between my parents was that my father and my brother would move to Kuwait and I would stay with my mom. As much as I am today, I was even more sassy then. And I was very independent, but I couldn't understand why I would stay and my brother and my dad would go. But it just made sense in the 80s that little girls stay with their moms and boys go with their dads. That's just what you do, and especially in Middle Eastern culture. That's just what happened. And I don't ever remember like voicing my opinion or talking about it, but as a child, I do remember having feelings about it. And I think that I'm looking back on this with the identity of an adult and probably identifying with my small, maybe like weirdness. I'm talking from like a high level perspective, but maybe my inner child and wanting to give that child like a voice or something. But I didn't. And anyways, my feelings were hurt and I became sassy and angry. And so I stayed with my mom. We drove across the country from California to New York, where my mom went to medical school, to Albany. And I will tell you what, Albany was cold. That'll make anybody cranky and angry. And I was angry and I was acting up. And so my brother and my dad moved to Kuwait, and it was just me and my mom in Albany. And that was really hard for me as a little girl. I missed my brother and my dad. I missed them a lot. And that was a big, big hole for me. And I spent a lot of time by myself. And I remember that was when I first discovered MTV and those music videos. And there was that one music video that was like all in pencil. And I'm like, MTV is the business, you know? And I really started discovering culture and things and arts and The Simpsons. That's when The Simpsons first came on. And oh man, I was just about it and just fiercely independent. And it was okay because my mom was there, but she wasn't. And I remember I used to sleep with her in her bed because that was really like the only time that I could be around her. And I also, I had to develop a new group of friends and I had friends, but I didn't. And so I was just shaping this identity that became very different. And I didn't want to get close to people. And so things were just really shifting. And that piece that I knew about my culture was gone because my mom didn't speak to me in Arabic. I didn't have that cultural piece anymore. And I'm also, I'm fair. I have the blonde hair and I'm not really identifying as Kuwaitia anymore. So again, just lots of shifts in identity. Me and my mom fly to Kuwait and we get to see my family. I see my brother's there. He's engaging in all of this. We have a huge family in Kuwait, huge. And then we come back. We end up leaving New York and coming to Denver and spending time in Denver. So I'm moving around a lot. More of the same. Then the war happens. I remember the invasion of Kuwait as being one of the most terrifying things of my childhood, because we didn't know what had happened to my brother, my dad, my whole family. And, and I think of, I I've been told, you're a child of war. And everything that was supposed to happen to our family and our life and what we were, like I knew about what my life was going to be like became shattered. And what happened also during that time was what I knew that I was supposed to know about fear. I was taught what fear was, and fear was to not show any emotion at all. I never saw my grandparents cry. I never saw my mom cry. I would see my mom on the phone with the American Embassy trying to figure out, if my brother and my dad were even alive or what was going on. And I never saw anybody like get upset or scream or react. And it taught me how we were supposed to relate. And that really did something to me as a child. And I will let you know that all was well, and everybody got out of Kuwait. My brother, we we actually ended up seeing him because we're kids, right? So he was flown out he was flown out on a plane, but we have a bunch of family that lives in New York, and so my brother was seen like running back and forth, like messing around, jerking around, and on a news camera. And all my family saw him like making funny faces, like behind news footage as they were recording in New York, and they were like, "Oh my God, we just saw him on TV." And so that was actually the first time that I ever saw my mom like really express emotion, was when she knew that he was okay and he had gotten out of the country, and it was like, oh, okay. And so, anyways, that taught me a lot about emotion as well. So I think that was another place in my life, like I felt another big hole was around fear, right? So I've touched on kind of independency, sassiness, repressing emotions, right? And these were all things that, the shaping of my cultural identity. And I held on to this stuff. I held on to it. Between the career shaping of my parents and, how I learned how to process and deal with emotions, my feelings of like codependency, which also, I really didn't learn how to have healthy coping mechanisms is pretty much what I'm leading up to. And now by the time I'm 13, so still in Denver, my parents end up deciding that it's better for them to divorce. Cultural differences are too much. Career paths are too much. We're not moving back to Kuwait. It's decided that it's better not to go back to a war-torn country. At this point, I have already accepted that we're not going to have that family unit like I believed that we would. And I already have a level of acceptance around this. My brother has come back to the United States and is staying, at least for a while. Now my mom moves us to Jackson, Mississippi. Let me tell you about the South. I don't know how many people have ever test run the South, but if you are not from the South and you are from this general area, the South will blow your mind. The South is something else. We moved to Jackson, Mississippi, and the culture of the South is both beautiful and confusing. And, being of Middle Eastern descent, and then we moved to the South. At the time, the South had the worst public school systems. Jackson, in particular, had the worst public school systems in the country. So my mom and dad decided that it would be better for us to go to a Christian school. To this day, I don't know if that was the best choice. So for the first time in my life ever, outside of the few prayers that, a bit of the teachings that my dad had given us, which we decided were not for us. not what we wanted. So we had absolutely no exposure to organized religion at all. And we were then put into a Christian school. That was the first time I had ever had exposure to organized religion in my life. And we were put into a Christian school, and it was a very difficult transition for both my brother and I. They were unfamiliar with what Middle Eastern even was in Jackson, Mississippi. And it was a difficult year for my brother and I, and we did not acclimate very well. They were somewhat discriminatory against my brother. They needed to assume that we had to be some form of something, but and my brother's very olive skinned and I am not. And so he was more discriminated against than I was. But the South has a very deep culture that in many ways, I did come to appreciate just because of how unique it was. And we got to go to like Mardi Gras, and we took a trip down to Florida. And so there was a lot of things that we got to do that I was really grateful for the experience. But after our 1 year in Jackson, I was really grateful to move back to Colorado after that. And so we moved back to Colorado, and now I'm just turning 12 years old, and this is when I start to experience drugs and things for the first time. So I drink for the first time when I'm 12 years old, and I'm not sure again where my mom is. I think she's moonlighting back and forth between Jackson and Colorado because of work. She's still pursuing. She does graduate from med school. She takes on emergency medicine. But I drink for the first time. Within the next year, I start using pot. By the time I'm 13, I get into meth is the first drug that I ever use. By the time I'm 13, I pop off a lot. I have a tendency to I can go from 0 to 100 really quick. I'm still pretty sassy. My mom ends up getting remarried. And she has a baby. And the two kids my mom has, I'm gonna slide this part in because this becomes incredibly important. The two babies my mom has, I become a caretaker for, and I become a caretaker for them, and they in many ways are my guardian angels, because if it wasn't for them and the fact that I care for them, I probably would have died from the power of my disease. But having to stay grounded for these two little humans saves me from my own addiction, because when I care for them, I can't just go completely wild. Those who can't see me have to know that I'm taking a breath because of how much I love and appreciate the fact that they were in my life, even though at times I resented them deeply because I couldn't just go and get completely fucked up. At 13 years old is when I really start going out and getting involved in what I guess I would consider just deep drugs and popping off and doing some of the most. But at 13 years old, I also I get beat up really bad for the first time too, which is good. So my pop off and getting my ass handed to me all coincidentally happens at the same time, and that was kind of a safe thing to have happen. This my very first fight that I get into, and it was with a friend of mine. We had a fight over dope, and she takes me by the hair and she rams me into a tree trunk, and I end up getting knocked out. But what that did for me was that it let me know that no matter how bad the fight was that I would survive. And so what I realized is that I can get into fights with people and it doesn't really matter if I lose. Like I would end up being okay. And that did not, I guess in some ways it served me well, but it also taught me a lot about not just running off at the mouth at people. If you're going to throw blows with people, it needs to be legitimately and validly worth it. And also you need to, it meant that I was really going to need to be able to fight with them. And so I learned a lot about fighting with people, and I learned that I could take a whooping and that it was going to be all right in the end. Yeah. Right. So from 13 until 18, I experienced a lot about the streets. Like, Colorado Springs at the time in the mid 90s was just, it was a really bizarre place. The culture of the 90s was one where everybody was kind of doing something. I mean, if you were a legitimate dope dealer, you had a triple beam, like your dope dealer was not traveling. And so if you ended up at a house where somebody had a triple beam, it was like,
blame a triple beam. We're in 2023.
So a triple beam was a way to weigh drugs, and it was a very large apparatus that you couldn't just throw into the back seat. And also, that dude was probably up for 9 days seeing shadow people, and you didn't just arrive at his house. Like, it was somebody who, you didn't just get there. Like, so the culture was very, very different, and people were very, very different in the 90s. It was a very, the dope was different. The people were different. It was I want to say it was like a very loyal culture, and people were genuinely invested in the drug culture. Anyways, so I between the ages of 13 and I want to say like 18 years old, Colorado Springs was just I think at 14 I had been involved in a drive-by that I don't even know why it happened. I still remember the first time I was in a car and I ever heard a gun go off. I remember it sounded so loud, and I was behind the driver. And I remember thinking to myself, like, what are we even shooting at? What is even happening? But it was so fast. And, thinking like, I hope we didn't, hit somebody, right? But I also remember again that sense of like not having fear, right? Just being involved in situations where things had become so normalized, and that I think for other people, that probably should have been not a normal situation. But for me, I was just there. And And now when I look back on things, I realized that that was probably not normal, right? Like, this is not a normal situation. There probably could have been a different reaction to that situation. And this is now my adult self recognizing, wanting to say to my little self, like, get out of there, right? But that's the work I get to do today. That's the work in my recovery today. I get to say, it's okay. I don't have to have shame and I don't have to have guilt. And I get to work through these things and I get to honor that for myself and I get to validate those feelings that I have today because that's where I am. And I lived through those experiences and it is okay, right? But for that self that didn't have that fear and that didn't say, hey, this is not normal, that's just where I was in those moments in time. And I can reflect back and know that that's just where I was, right? So I also remember being like 16 years old and just sitting in a room just talking about God knows what, doesn't even matter, and hearing pap, 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 and seeing, something come across. And the only thing I remember saying to myself was when I looked around the room and being like, well, I know they're not mad at me, so which one of you is it, right? Like I know that's not my fault. And that being my reaction, right? Which is also, in reflection, like that's also not a normal reaction. But again, I can honor that experience and I can just say, that's okay, right? This is the work that my adult self can do for my adolescent self, and I can let it go and I can move forward and I can say that's okay. Because this is what my recovery has afforded for me today. And I can honor that. So that's my adolescent experience, right? And there's more of that. And those are my earliest kind of memories. Those when I play this movie in my mind of, what are those things that I want to talk about today, to say, if you can hear me now, and if this story can help anybody, and if I can help try to normalize some of these things for people and say, we do recover, right? We do have these experiences, and yes, we do recover. Those are those kind of like trigger point moments for me where I can say, these are some of those things, right? From I want to say 18 to, I don't know, I'm going to go with like my mid 20s or so. I'm caring for my younger brother and sister. And like I was trying to talk about those kids, my younger brother and my younger sister, they help keep me grounded. I'm caring for them, and I'm also deep in this addiction, right? I'm involved in like weird things, and I'm everywhere. I have this sense of identity that is shifting and shaping, and I float from like group of people to group of people, and it doesn't matter. And I'm always uniquely me. I remember again in the 90s, right? When it came to clicking up or like getting affiliated, there were two ways that women could click up. And you either got fucked in or you got jumped in. I remember watching a woman get jumped in, and even for being scrappy, I was like, oh no, that will not work for me. She got it handed to her so badly that I said, absolutely not. I remember being with, like so many different groups of people and being able to just like float around, just like a rolling stone. And that is how I identified, constantly being able to float, neutrally going wherever I wanted to go all the time. And I think a lot of that had to do now, right? Looking back, I think a lot of that had to do with being able to belong everywhere and nowhere at all. Everywhere and nowhere at all. Being able to feel accepted by everyone, and then really always having this sense of really, in my own mind, like not really truly being accepted by anybody ever, right? Like that's how I saw myself. And I even think part of that still resonates today, except that I found my community when I found the 12 steps. That's how I've been able to figure it out, by finding a philosophy. And that's how I became able to be grounded, was the community that I found by finding the philosophy. So I needed to put that in. So by about 24, I ended up going to, or 22, I decided that I needed to, I'm sorry, let me back up. I ended up getting kicked out of high school. That was a big major blow point in my life. Because I couldn't be bothered with first and second period. It was too early for me. I was too busy doing other things. And they knew that I was using, and when I walked into class one day, so I'm 17, and they were all waiting for me, like all the principal, they had the whole, they were being extra, but they had all the peoples up there waiting, and they made me call my mom, who was working for the Department of Corrections at the time in Canyon City, because she's now, the medical director of all the things. And they made me call my mom at work, and I'm high as a kite. And I had to call my mom at work and be like, Mom, I am being expelled from high school because I cannot make it to first or second period. And that was one of the worst experiences ever. So I had to sit there with all of the peoples, like the principal, the vice principal. I almost feel like we had 2 vice principals in my memory for some reason, and wait for her to drive from Canyon City up to the school. And like my high, of course, like won't go away, It's like the high that will never end, and be expelled from school. And then for some reason, because at the time it seemed like a big deal, but then once I left, then I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'm expelled from school. And I was like, well, and then that night I was like, I have a party that I'm going to. And my mom was like, she was so crazy mad at me that I could even imagine going to this party. So I snuck out my window to go to that party, because I still was so entitled, and just nothing was making sense to me. Like I could not understand how bad of an addict I was. It wasn't making sense, like how bad of an addict I was. I will tell you that I think something that I missed on this whole time was that I was always a good student the whole time. I was always a good student. I never wasn't a good student. I always got good grades when I chose to show up. So I know I'm jumping around a lot, but it's my brain. But so that's
perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. And nowadays they have what? Principal, assistant principal, 2 deans, and a partridge in a pear tree. You know what I mean?
For real.
It's you weren't just high. It was a real thing.
I feel like there really was. In my brain, I feel like there was like 2 vice principals there. It felt like a lot of people were there. Like they pulled out all the people. Maybe they even pulled one in from somewhere. I don't know. But I felt like there were so many people that were there. They brought in the crew. So where do I want to go next? Where do I want to go next? It's almost like I have this like movie playing in my mind, right? Because this is my story, and this is the great thing, right? We get to, this is what we get to do in our recovery, is that we get to be the director and the narrator of our story, and we get to tell it how we want to. I think I think where I want to go with this next is, I would like to, very importantly, I want to talk about some of the abuse that I endured, because some of the abuse that I endured in a relationship that I was in really changed how I looked at the world, and it changed how I showed up in the world. And it also became kind of how I stepped into my power. So for a lot of the women and men out there who are listening, what I want you to know is that my power is my pain, and my courage is my crown. I was in an incredibly abusive and toxic relationship for 10 years of my life. And that relationship, at one point, I became a victim by choice. That is not something I will ever do again. I was with a person who changed the way that I view reality. There was a ton of gaslighting and abuse and trauma and torment and pain. I literally allowed myself to stay stuck in something that was so incredibly toxic and unhealthy. And at some point, the cycle of abuse just became so sick, and that I didn't know how to get out. I didn't know how to change the dynamic of it. And I stayed because I confused the difference between love and lust. I lost my sense of self so much, and my identity was broken to my core. And what happened in this relationship was that I had to, when I finally, after many attempts of trying to break away, and then I would go back and break away and go back, what finally ended up happening at the end of this relationship was that I was left not knowing who I was anymore. And I had to figure out how to learn who I was all over again. And once I got to redefine who I was, I became this whole new person. And that was really very, very scary for me. And that took that took so much courage. And I will tell you that new person was nowhere near who I was when I first met that individual. And that had to become okay. That it had to become okay for me to be completely different than the woman that I was when I first entered that relationship 10 years before. I had to be okay with letting go of the woman that I was when I met that man in the beginning, because I will never be the woman that I was when I met him. And I am completely and totally okay with knowing that I have changed and I have grown and I have shifted and I have shaped. And I think that it's really important for anybody who has ever been abused to understand that you do lose your sense of identity, but you get to rebuild and reshape a brand new sense of identity. And the important thing also to know is that you do become empowered from pain. Pain doesn't have to be debilitating. Pain can become very, very empowering. And we don't have to be victims by choice ever again, ever again. So after being in a very abusive and toxic relationship, in that time, by the way, I did go to college, and I did graduate from college. I got my bachelor's degree. I went on to work for corporate America. That whole time I was living this dual life, as many abused people often do. So I would go to college, and I would come home, and I would just be like, don't hit me, or don't at least punch me, and don't hit me in the face. Like, oh God, all the weird things that we say. And so and then I worked for corporate America, and I worked for corporate America for 5 years, actually. And I remember one time someone had OD'd. Someone had OD'd, and I literally had to step over him in my business casual attire to go to work. And at this time, now I'm on heroin. So, I mean, and the substances are all different. It's meth, it's heroin, it's alcohol. Alcohol, by the way, has been my ride or die for me the whole time, with the exception of when I'm on heroin. That's the only time I'm not drinking. Otherwise, me and alcohol are tight. I would drink on Antabuse. I'd figure out a way. Me and alcohol we're in it, with the exception of heroin. Heroin is the only time I am not using alcohol. But I have this very vivid memory of going to work at my corporate job and literally having to I can't be late, and they got things going on. They've got it under control, and I have to step over him to get to work. And he does, and this dude, he does survive, right? And this is before Narcan. This is 2011, I think it was.
Those techniques used to be crazy. Frozen chicken.
I mean,
ice
up,
slapping in the face,
all the craziness, and I'm like, it's under control, like I got to get out of here. I don't have time for this, right?
I'm not pumping his chest.
I have got to go.
You get the frozen chicken.
I am the one who is working. Everybody else has this under control, right? Like I got to get out of here, and that's what I did. So, and more of these stories carry on. So I do want to get to my recovery, but, the ascension continues. I get to, by the time I get to the latter part of my disease, it has completely escalated to a point that I don't even know what starts happening or how I end up at the point that I end up at. But people start trusting me with enormous amounts of dope. And I'm like, why is this happening? But it does. And, and I start seeing things where I'm like, it's like being in a Quentin Tarantino spaghetti Western, right? Like you're out there, you're doing the most. I can remember having conversations with people about, driving across the border, stopping or being slow enough with the car to like let piles of people jump in to move them across the border. Are the drones going to sense body heat? I mean, just conversations that are like so surreal. And that became my life. And I would get glimpses of myself and just having having enormous amounts of just different types of drugs that I don't even know why I have them or why I'm doing what I'm doing, and thinking like, how did I get here? And what am I doing? And why am I doing this? And it just kept going and kept going. And so there was this one time about 3 months before that final arrest I was talking about, where I had been driving back and forth between Colorado Springs, because I would plug in the Springs, and then I would, like do the dusting, whatever up in Denver. And I had pulled my car over on the side of the road, like one of those like, and I got out, and I remember just like falling to my knees to whatever source in the sky. I didn't give a fuck. Buddha, Allah, God, spirit, whatever was willing to give me the time to listen. And I remember screaming and saying, please help me and make this stop, because I don't know how. And I had this incredible feeling of not knowing if I was dead or alive, if it was a dream, and genuinely not giving a fuck either way. It didn't matter anymore. Like, it just didn't matter. And that there's a difference between like wanting to die and not caring if you were already dead. And that's kind of like where I was. And so when I talk about my recovery today and how incredibly, incredibly blessed and humble and grateful I am to have found recovery, I was someone who got who was found by the state of Colorado at the last minute. And they said, and it was like these acts of the universe that no human being could have possibly orchestrated, right? Where they stepped in, and all these things had to happen. Like, I had to be like lost in Adams County for a day where they just forgot about me in a cell, and like weird stuff had to happen. But it happened that I got into the therapeutic community, and I was just so willing to do whatever they said. And I have just been in a state of willingness ever since. I'm so open and receptive to all those things: God, Allah, the universe, spirit, all of it, everything, every suggestion that I get, everything. I am willing to do whatever it takes to stay clean one more day. And I don't know what my tomorrow looks like, but I keep doing what I need to do that has worked for me yesterday, today. And I take the suggestions from the people who have clean time and who have, who tell me to keep coming back and keep showing up. And I've built an amazing community of other like-minded people, and the ones who suggest that I do those things that are suggested in this 12-step program of recovery that I've come to know and trust and believe in. I believe in it so much. Like, I do not want to go back to that feeling that I had. I don't want to go back to that feeling that I had on the side of the road that day, where I had to question whether or not I was dead or alive. Like, I don't want to ever feel like that again. I don't ever want to have to look at my mom or dad and know that I keep them up at night with them wondering if I'm dead or alive. Like, that's not fair for me to do. And I don't know if the people that are listening to this message if anything that I've said has planted any seeds for you. But for those of you that are struggling, what I want you to know from me is that if nobody has told you yet today that they love you and you are worth it, I hope you hear me when I tell you that I love you and you are worth it. And you matter to people that you have not even met yet. I think that is all that I have.
Man, that's
a lot.
Yes. You covered recovery, family. Everybody that's listening, you hear the breaths of emotion. That is truly recovery living inside of a person. If you want to know what that looks like, pick up the phone, call a friend, get on the side of the road and pray. You know, she probably covered everything all the way to the Hindu religion to Christianity that morning, to screaming off the devil, you know, and that's just basically what happens, you know. If you want to live, just get that ounce of courage to ask for help. You don't got to do it yourself. You don't. If you're struggling right now, if you're sitting in the can, you're sitting in prison, you're wondering, if you're in a place where you shouldn't be right now, just listening to the radio and just looking for help, go find somebody. The world has a tendency to show up for you when you can't show up for yourself, if that makes sense. It has that tendency to show up for you, and it's going to surprise you, and it's going to hurt, like she explained. God doesn't have a medical detox. He just he puts you in it. It's gonna burn. You're gonna slap your face. You're gonna go through the pain, and you're gonna feel it. But if you stick through it, you're gonna be okay, and you're gonna learn from that rug burn. Thank you for being here today in the journey that you're doing. Thank you for everybody's. Yes, I put a lot of people that work for me. I have quite a few people that work for me, and they're right in front of me and they have an amazing story. And I'm not trying to just make it as a tribe, tribe of tribe. It's just when you got amazing people. I've been looking for a business development professional to train Green, and me and my partners that are, and the leadership team have been looking for Nohnie for quite a while, and she just shows up every day, and I just want to thank you for that. Thank you for helping us in Denver and Las Vegas and the things that we're doing. It's just amazing. You're in the new studio. I want to give Sean a big thank you, Max Media, all that for making it happen. Slim over here just sticking back to the thing. If you want to add anything, I get long-winded, but
oh, dude, you have the best long winds, okay?
Yeah. You hear that, babe, Keisha? You think so?
Don't talk to your wife right now. Nohnie, one thing you said was keep doing, I'm not quoting exactly, but keep doing what worked yesterday to keep going today. And I really like that.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you for sharing with us. And I think that what you had to say was very important and impactful. So I really appreciate you taking the time to do that with us today. You said so many things. My power is my pain, and my courage is my crown. There's so many things that you said that stuck out to me, but I can't condense them all into the time we have left. But I thank you for taking the time to share. Mile High, if the words that she said hit you in, you do want to make that phone call. 720-60-TRIBE is the number to reach out to Tomas and his crew. If they can't help you, they want to put you in touch with an organization that can. And that doesn't have to be Tribe Recovery Homes. There's so many recovery homes and treatment centers here in the Mile High and nationwide. If you're watching from afar, you can also pick up the phone. You can call AA. The number for AA is 866-210-1303. It's 866-210-1303. You can call Narcotics Anonymous, 303-412-2884. And you can pick up the phone and call Tribe Recovery Homes at 720-60-TRIBE. So there's a lot of numbers and resources for you. You can grab your phone right now and you can Google what your issue is. And I promise you, you're going to find a number for somebody that's there, ready to talk to you and help you. So, you know, you always get these phone numbers thrown at you and you go, I can't keep track of that. You have access right here in your phone to start the process. And you can call a friend or a family member, and if they truly love you, they're going to be there for you too. Nohnie Al-Jalil has been our guest from Colorado Springs. We thank her for coming in. This program is Sharing Our Stories. We're here each Sunday, and we bring in a different guest to talk to you about addiction and recovery and to let you know that there is a pathway to your recovery. And as she said earlier, yes, we do recover. So I want to thank you for joining us this morning. I want to thank Nohnie once again for coming in. And Mile High, if you want to listen to this program again from the beginning, you'll be able to find it online, facebook.com/SOS Sharing Our Stories. You can also find it on jammin1015.com, flowdenver.com. And if you're watching online with us right now, because we also have a live feed going on, we want to thank you for being a part of it this morning. This is Sharing Our Stories. Thank you so much for being here, and have a great day.